Chapter 1. The schedule that ate everything. Melissa more liked lists. Lists did not second-guess themselves, they did not hesitate, and most importantly, they did not forget. Everything written down existed in a tidy, controllable universe where nothing slipped between the cracks. Unless, of course, it never made it onto the list in the first place. At 7:12 a.m., her phone chimed twice, once for her calendar reminder, and once for a message she didn't have time to read. Melissa, brushing mascara onto one eye while mentally reviewing her day, tapped the calendar notification open with the confidence of someone who had already memorized it. Budget review, client call, team sync, she murmured, tilting her head back slightly for better lighting. Dinner with Jess, tentative. Tentative, she thought, as if there were such a thing lately. Behind her, Daniel leaned against the bedroom doorframe, coffee mug in one hand, watching her with the patient stillness of someone who had long ago learned not to interrupt a moving train. "You've got the promotion today?" he asked, voice casual, as if it didn't matter, as if he didn't already know the answer was no, not yet. "Not today," she said, switching eyes without looking at him. "But I'm getting closer. Clarkson said the board is reviewing everything by the end of the month, so..." She opened her free hand slightly as if presenting the conclusion. "This is the push." Daniel nodded, taking a slow sip of his coffee. "The push sounds intense." "It's supposed to be," Melissa replied, lips tightening briefly in concentration as she corrected a minor mascara smudge. "That's how it works. You don't get promoted for doing your job. You get promoted for doing more than your job." There was no bitterness in her voice, only certainty. Daniel gave a faint smile. "Good thing you've never had trouble with more." She smiled back then, quick and bright, finally catching his reflection in the mirror. "Are you making fun of me?" "Not even a little," he said. "I'm in awe. I can barely convince myself to do exactly my job." "That's because your job doesn't rely on visible overachievement," she said, turning fully now, energized and already halfway out the door in her mind. "Different structure." "Right," he said. "Structure." There was a pause, not awkward, not heavy, just quiet. Daniel studied her for a moment, as if trying to find the right entry point into a conversation he hadn't fully decided to have. "Hey," he said finally, keeping his tone light. "What does your schedule look like in a few weeks?" Melissa blinked, momentarily thrown by the shift in topic. "A few weeks?" "Yeah," he said, shrugging slightly. "Just roughly." She laughed, not unkindly, but distractedly. "Roughly? It looks like chaos, Daniel. The entire month is chaos." He waited, giving her space to elaborate. "I've got the final presentations, probably some travel, definitely extra hours," she continued, grabbing her bag and checking for her keys in the same motion. "Why?" "No reason," he said easily. "Just wondering." That was Daniel. He wondered things. He didn't announce them like headlines or push them into urgent importance. He collected them, turned them over quietly in his mind, and if the answer mattered, he figured it out. Melissa kissed his cheek as she passed him. "If you were thinking of planning something, you might want to aim for, like, next year." He chuckled. "I'll pencil it in." "Put it on a list," she called over her shoulder as she headed toward the door. "That's the only way it survives." "I'll remember that," he said. The door clicked shut behind her, leaving Daniel standing alone in the gentle quiet of their apartment. He took another sip of his coffee, then set the mug down on the kitchen counter with deliberate care. His gaze drifted toward the calendar on the wall, an actual, physical one Melissa had insisted on buying but rarely used. There, circled in faint blue ink, almost apologetic in its existence, was a date he didn't need help remembering. 5 years. Daniel exhaled slowly, not quite a sigh. "Chaos," he repeated softly to himself. He didn't sound angry. He sounded like he had just finished solving a puzzle he hadn't wanted the answer to. Across town, Melissa stepped into the elevator of her office building, already typing out a message, already moving forward. The doors closed with a quiet chime, sealing her inside a world of targets and timelines. If she hesitated, if she glanced back at anything she might have missed, it didn't show. After all, it wasn't on the list. Chapter 2. Tickets not mentioned. The idea came to Daniel all at once and then, once settled, refused to leave. It wasn't dramatic. It didn't arrive with anger or even disappointment sharp enough to sting. It was quieter than that, like a conclusion written in pencil at the bottom of a page he had been slowly filling in for months. Facts, he had once joked. Facts didn't care how you felt about them. And the facts were simple. 5 years of marriage deserved acknowledgement. He had acknowledged it, planned for it, paid for it, looked forward to it in the quiet, unspoken way he handled most things, steadily, without spectacle. Melissa hadn't. Not intentionally. He knew that. But intention didn't cancel outcome. It just explained it. Daniel sat at the kitchen table that evening, his laptop open, email half-written and blinking its patient cursor at him. The confirmation details stared back. Flights booked, cabin reserved, meals selected. For days. Coastal departure. Balcony view. He had spent longer than he cared to admit choosing that balcony. "Too much," he had muttered to himself at the time, hovering over the upgrade button. Then he'd clicked it anyway. Now it stared back at him like an investment in a future that had quietly shifted its timeline. The front door opened, accompanied by the familiar rhythm of heels kicked off just inside. I swear if Clarkson says circle back one more time, I'm going to start bringing an actual circle to meetings, Melissa announced, dropping her bag onto the couch like it had personally wronged her. Daniel smiled faintly, closing the laptop without making a show of it. You could make it a team-building exercise. Oh, don't tempt me, she said, appearing in the doorway to the kitchen. Her hair was slightly looser than it had been that morning, her energy still running high in that leftover way work sometimes lingered. How was your day? Productive, he said. It wasn't untrue. Good, she replied, already reaching for a glass. Mine was chaos. Productive chaos, but still chaos. Of course it was. She grinned at him, quick and appreciative, then leaned against the counter as she took a sip of water. For a moment, she simply existed there, relaxed, comfortable, fully herself in the space they shared. Daniel watched her, noting how easily she fit into every part of his life, even now. Hey, she said suddenly, as if remembering something mid-thought. I volunteered for that business trip. His eyebrows lifted slightly. You did? Yeah, she said, nodding excited now. It's big, like visibility big. If I nail it, it could push things forward faster. When is it? He asked. Next week, she said. 4 days. Daniel didn't react immediately, not outwardly. Inside, however, the timing clicked neatly into place, aligning with the information he already had. Same 4 days, same window, same quiet, penciled-in date on the wall calendar. He nodded once. That sounds important. It is, she said firmly, then softened. I know it's short notice, but it's worth it. I believe you, Daniel said. She studied him briefly, as if expecting some resistance, some hesitation, something she could push against or reassure. He gave her none of it. Okay, she said slowly, reassured by his calm. Good. There was a pause, thinner than the one that morning, but still present. You're okay with it? She asked, just to be sure. Daniel considered the question, not the words themselves, but what she meant by them. Was he okay with it? The trip? The promotion? Her ambition? Yes. Was he okay with the pattern the decision fit into? That was different. I'm okay with you doing what matters to you, he said, tone even, expression open. It was the kind of answer that sounded fully supportive because, in many ways, it was. But it wasn't as complete as it might have been once. Melissa smiled, relief immediate. Thank you. Seriously. You don't need my permission, he added gently. I know, she said. But I like that I don't have to fight for it. Daniel let out a soft breath of amusement. I've never been much for fighting. That's what I love about you, she said without hesitation. The words landed warmly, but not heavily. Compliment and truth, both lightly worn. She moved around the kitchen, opening the fridge, scanning its contents with purpose. I'll be busy leading up to it, she continued. Late nights, probably. But after that, things should calm down a bit. Daniel nodded again, absorbing the timeline. Late nights before, for days gone, then calm. After. He could map out the entire month in his head now. Not because she'd given him every detail, but because she didn't need to. The pattern was consistent. Then you should go all in, he said. I will, she promised, flashing him that same bright, confident smile from earlier that morning. I'm going to crush it. I have no doubt, Daniel replied. And he meant that too. She was good at what she did. Exceptional, even. He'd never once questioned her ability to succeed. That wasn't the problem. The problem, he realized, wasn't even a problem in the way people usually meant it. It was simply a direction. And directions led somewhere whether you stopped to evaluate them or not. Later that night, after Melissa had fallen asleep, phone still loosely in her hand, a half-finished message glowing dimly on the screen, Daniel reopened his laptop. The confirmation page appeared exactly as he'd left it. No changes, no cancellations, no adjustments. He hovered over the contact information tab, briefly considering whether to update the second passenger name. There were options, procedures, possibilities. He closed the tab. Instead, he checked the flight times again. Departure, arrival, boarding group. Everything was in order. Already paid for, he murmured to himself. He wasn't saying it as justification, just acknowledging the fact the way he always did. Facts didn't argue. They didn't demand interpretation. They simply existed, waiting to be accepted or ignored. Daniel wasn't planning to argue with this one. He shut the laptop carefully, folding it closed like a decision made without ceremony. Across the room, Melissa shifted slightly in her sleep, turning toward the empty space beside her without fully waking. For a moment, Daniel watched her, something unreadable passing through his expression, something softer than logic, but quieter than regret. Then he turned off the light. In the darkness, the apartment felt the same as it always had. Comfortable, familiar, shared. Only now, for the first time, it also felt divided. Not in a way that demanded attention, but in a way that no longer needed it to continue. Chapter 3, departure gates, airports had a way of making everything feel urgent, even the things that weren't. Melissa thrived in that kind of environment. Gate change to C12, she muttered to herself, already adjusting her stride without breaking pace. Her phone buzzed constantly in her hand. Emails, last-minute clarifications, a message thread from her team that refused to quiet down. She typed quickly as she walked, weaving through clusters of travelers with instinctive precision. Tell Clarkson the revised numbers are in the shared file, she dictated under her breath. Not the old one, the updated one from last night. No, the later one. She hit send, glanced up just long enough to confirm she wasn't about to collide with a suitcase, then kept moving. The announcer's voice echoed overhead, something about final boarding. Melissa didn't register the details. She never did. Announcements were background noise unless they directly applied to her, which they almost always did. Of course, she said, quickening her pace. Perfect timing. At the same time, across another terminal, and another airline entirely, Daniel stood in a line that barely moved, holding a boarding pass he had printed out of habit, though it rested redundantly in his phone as well. He watched the people around him with mild curiosity. Couples mostly. Not exclusively, but enough to form a pattern that didn't require effort to notice. Matching carry-ons. Coordinated discussions about seats and snacks. The quiet negotiation of shared travel, where one person always carried something for the other whether they needed to or not. Daniel adjusted his grip on his own single bag. Just one? The agent asked when he stepped forward. One, he confirmed. She scanned his pass, expression neutral. Enjoy your trip. I plan to, he said, with an ease that surprised him slightly. It wasn't a lie. He wasn't dreading the trip. He wasn't even particularly heavy about it. There was an unfamiliar lightness beneath the situation, like stepping into a version of life he had technically always had access to but never used. A solo balcony on a cruise designed for two. He almost smiled. Back in Melissa's terminal, she reached her gate with seconds to spare, her breath only slightly elevated, her composure otherwise intact. Boarding group 3? The attendant asked. Right here, Melissa said, flashing her pass. You're just in time. Story of my life, Melissa replied, stepping forward. Inside the jet bridge, she finally slowed, her phone dropping to her side for the first time all morning. The noise softened, the rush narrowed, and for a brief moment, there was space. She leaned her head back against the wall, exhaling slowly. Okay, she whispered. You've got this. It wasn't doubt. It was routine. A reset before the next stretch. Her phone buzzed again. She glanced down at it automatically, expecting another thread, another request. Instead, it was Daniel. Have a good trip. Melissa smiled immediately, warmth replacing the tension in her shoulders. Thanks, she typed back. I'll call when I land. She hesitated for half a second before adding, miss you already. It wasn't something she said every time, but it felt right. She hit send and moved forward with the line. On Daniel's side, the boarding process was far less dramatic. He found his seat without complication, stowed his bag, and settled in with practiced ease. Around him, people were already negotiating armrests and window shades, adjusting themselves into shared spaces. He placed his phone on the tray table and looked at the message when it came through. Miss you already. The words sat there, simple and sincere. Daniel studied them for a moment. There was nothing false about them. He knew that. Melissa meant what she said when she said it. She wasn't careless with her feelings. She just didn't always notice when time had moved past a moment that mattered. He picked up his phone and typed back. I'll be here. He paused, then added, take names. A small callback. Consistent. Comforting. He watched the typing indicator appear, disappear, then settle into nothing as the plane doors closed and signals dropped. Well, he murmured quietly, leaning back in his seat. That's that. It wasn't resignation. It was acknowledgement. Hours later, Melissa stepped out of her destination airport, phone already back to full activity, her mind shifting seamlessly into work mode. Where are we on the client brief? She asked into her headset, walking briskly toward the rideshare pickup area. No, don't wait for me. Start without me. I'll catch up in the cab. She slid into the back seat without looking up, greeting the driver with a distracted but polite nod. The city outside blurred into motion, unfamiliar but irrelevant. She wasn't here to see it. She was here to make something happen. On the opposite coast, Daniel arrived somewhere quieter. The air carried salt, light, and the faint hum of anticipation that seemed to belong to vacation destinations and nowhere else. He stepped out of the taxi, taking a second longer than necessary to absorb the environment. People moved differently here, slower, deliberate, unconcerned with timelines that demanded justification. Daniel adjusted the strap of his bag and looked toward the harbor where the cruise ship loomed, massive and gleaming, its presence undeniable in both size and expectation. For days, he said to himself, not a challenge, not a test, just a fact. He checked in without issue, collected his keycard, and followed the steady stream of passengers moving toward boarding. Conversations overlapped around him. Plans, excitement, shared anticipation. He didn't join in. He didn't avoid it either. He simply existed within it. When he stepped onto the ship, the subtle shift beneath his feet registered immediately. Movement, forward motion, the kind you couldn't fully control once it started. Daniel let out a quiet breath, something almost like a laugh. Appropriate, he said. Later that evening, Melissa sat at a long conference table under bright, artificial light, her laptop open, her attention sharp and unwavering. So if we reposition the timeline here, she said, tapping the screen decisively, we gain leverage on the rollout without compromising the budget allocation. Her colleagues nodded, engaged, impressed. She felt it, the momentum, the recognition building, the sense that she was exactly where she needed to be. Her phone lay face down beside her, silent. Across the country, Daniel stood alone on a balcony overlooking open water. The horizon stretched endlessly, the fading sunlight painting the surface in soft gold and deep blue. He rested his hands on the railing, letting the breeze fill the space around him. No meetings, he said quietly. No deadlines. No need to justify how he spent the next hour or the next. Just time. Behind him, laughter echoed faintly from the deck, couples sharing drinks, leaning into each other as the ship carried them forward. Daniel didn't turn around. Instead, he looked out at the water, steady and unbroken. 2 trips, same duration, same days, entirely different directions, and neither of them, not quite yet, fully understood where those directions would lead. Chapter 4. The vacation that wasn't shared. The first thing Daniel discovered about traveling alone on a couple's cruise was that nobody quite knew what to do with him. Just one? The activities coordinator asked, clipboard hovering midair as if waiting for a second name to materialize out of politeness. Just one, Daniel confirmed, offering a small, agreeable smile. The coordinator hesitated, not rudely, just uncertainly, then nodded. Of course, you'll still have a wonderful time. I'm counting on it, Daniel said. He wasn't lying. It was just that wonderful seemed to have been designed with a specific structure in mind. One that involved 2 lounge chairs angled toward each other, 2 glasses arriving unasked, and 2 sets of footsteps that matched pace without effort. Daniel found his assigned spot by the pool anyway, settling into a chair that had clearly been positioned for conversation that wasn't happening. To his left, a couple debated sunscreen strategies with the seriousness of a financial negotiation. To clarify, the man said, squinting at the bottle, this is SPF 50, not 30? Yes, the woman replied patiently. We discussed this. I just like to verify, he said. Of course you do. Daniel leaned back, adjusting his sunglasses slightly as he listened. Not intruding but not entirely disengaged either. Verification is important, he murmured quietly to himself. When a server approached, he ordered a drink without consulting anyone. That part, at least, was refreshingly simple. Across the country, Melissa discovered that business trips had a way of stripping glamour down to its bare bones. Does this room come with lighting designed to make everyone look exhausted? Or is that an upgrade package? She asked, gesturing vaguely at the overly bright conference space. Her colleague, Trevor, snorted. No, that's standard. They throw it in for free to keep expectations low. Thoughtful, Melissa said dryly. She flipped through her notes, her focus sharpening quickly despite the environment. If the surroundings weren't impressive, the work still needed to be. All right, she said, tapping the table lightly. Let's run it again. This time we tighten the opening, less explanation, more impact. Trevor nodded. Got it. Her phone buzzed briefly beside her, but she didn't look at it. She rarely did during these moments. Work came first, not out of obligation but because she genuinely thrived there. Structure, forward motion, measurable results. Still, when the meeting finally broke hours later, the energy drained from the room, leaving behind a quiet she hadn't anticipated. Hotel hallways, she realized, were eerily consistent in their solitude. She unlocked her door, stepped inside, and let it click shut behind her. The room was clean, efficient, impersonal. Melissa dropped her bag onto the chair and sat on the edge of the bed, exhaling slowly. Okay, she said to no one. Day 1. She reached for her phone then, scanning through messages with the same precision she applied to everything else. Work threads, team updates, Jess sending her a meme she didn't fully process. And Daniel, hope your first day went well. The message timestamp pushed lightly against her awareness. Not recent, not old, just there. Melissa smiled faintly, typing quickly. It did. Long but good. She hesitated again, just for a second, then added, how's your week going? She sent it before overthinking it, then stood, already moving toward the bathroom. The conversation would continue when it did. There was no urgency. There rarely was. On the ship, Daniel discovered that dinner seating arrangements were equally committed to the idea that no one traveled alone. Table for 2? The host asked automatically. Daniel considered the question. Technically, he said. Yes. The host blinked, processing. Just me, though, Daniel added. Ah, the host said, recovering quickly. Of course. Right this way. Daniel followed, acutely aware of the subtle adjustments being made around him. Slight reconfigurations of space, a chair removed, a setting cleared. He sat down, unfolding his napkin with calm precision. The couple at the next table leaned toward each other, voices low but animated. "I told you we should have taken the earlier flight," the woman said. "And I told you we made it anyway," the man replied. "Which makes me correct. That's not how that works. It is in my interpretation." Daniel picked up the menu, scanning it thoughtfully. "Interpretation," he murmured under his breath. When the server arrived, he ordered without hesitation. No need to negotiate preferences. No need to check dietary restrictions. Efficiency had its perks. Still, when the food arrived, he found himself pausing. Not because anything was wrong, but because there was a moment, however brief, where sharing would have been natural. He cut into his meal instead. "Well spent," he said quietly. Melissa stood in a different kind of line that evening. This one for lukewarm hotel coffee she didn't particularly want but needed anyway. "Big presentation tomorrow?" Trevor asked, joining her. "Big enough," she said. "You'll nail it," he added. "I intend to," she replied. She carried the coffee back to her room, balancing it alongside her phone, which buzzed just as she set everything down. "Daniel, it's going well. Different." Melissa frowned slightly, reading the message again. "Different?" She typed back as she sat at the small desk. "Different how?" The response didn't come immediately. She opened her laptop instead, pulling up notes, adjusting slides, recalibrating points she had already perfected twice over. 10 minutes passed. 15. Finally, just quieter. Melissa tilted her head slightly, considering that. "That sounds nice," she typed. She meant it. Quiet sounded like a luxury. She glanced around her room, at the hum of the air conditioner, the faint noise from the hallway, the glow of her screen. "Nice," she repeated softly. Back on the balcony, Daniel leaned against the railing again, the night stretching endlessly in front of him. The ship moved steadily, cutting through dark water with quiet certainty. His phone rested in his hand, the last message from Melissa still visible. "That sounds nice." He looked at it for a moment, then out at the horizon. "Yes," he said softly. "It is." But it wasn't the kind of nice he thought she imagined. It wasn't restful. It wasn't indulgent. It was revealing. Quiet didn't fill space. It showed you where the space already was. Daniel slipped his phone into his pocket, exhaling slowly as the wind shifted around him. Inside, laughter rose again from the other decks, music carrying faintly across the night. He didn't turn toward it. Not yet. For now, he stayed where he was, between movement and stillness, between what had been planned and what was actually happening. And somewhere, just beneath the surface of both their separate worlds, something had begun to shift. Not dramatically, not loudly, but unmistakably. Chapter 5. The missing date. It wasn't a dramatic realization. There was no sudden gasp, no dropped phone, no cinematic moment where everything stopped and rearranged itself into clarity. It arrived quietly, like most important truths did, through accumulation. Melissa was standing in the hotel lobby on the third morning, halfway through a lukewarm breakfast sandwich she didn't remember ordering, when she opened her calendar to double-check a meeting time. The screen loaded quickly, efficient as always. Today's schedule appeared first, blocks of carefully managed time, each labeled, each purposeful. She scrolled. Tomorrow. Then backward, absently, her finger moving without intention. And then it stopped. Not because the calendar did anything unusual, because her brain finally did. The date sat there, plain and unembellished, circled in nothing, highlighted by no alert, silent. Melissa stared at it. "No," she whispered automatically, though nothing on the screen had changed. She blinked, hoping, absurdly, that she had misread it, scanned it again, did the quick mental calculation. Today was day 3, which meant, oh my God. The words left her mouth before she could stop them. A businessman at a nearby table glanced over briefly, then returned to his laptop. Melissa didn't notice. Her mind had already left the lobby. 5 years. 5 years, and she hadn't just missed it. She had scheduled over it. Not forgotten in the sense of absent-mindedness. Replaced. She lowered herself slowly into the nearest chair, sandwich forgotten in her hand. "No, no, no," she murmured under her breath, staring at her phone as if it might offer a correction. But facts, she thought dimly, didn't care about your feelings. They just were. And the fact was clear. She hadn't even thought about it. Not when Daniel asked about her schedule. Not when she volunteered for the trip. Not when she packed her bags. Her anniversary hadn't slipped. It hadn't been squeezed out. It simply hadn't existed in her awareness at all. The realization didn't come with sharp guilt at first. Came with something worse. Confusion. How did I? She started, then stopped. Because she knew how. She didn't need to piece it together. She had filled her life so completely with everything else that nothing unplanned had room to surface. Even something or someone who should have. Daniel. Her stomach tightened. Slowly, deliberately, she opened her messages. Scrolled. There he was. Steady. Present. Exactly where he always had been. Her text sat alongside his, calm and uncomplicated. Have a good trip. Hope your first day went well. Is going well. Different. Different. The word landed differently now. Her fingers hovered over the screen before she tapped his contact. The call rang longer than she expected. Once, twice, 3 times. Then voicemail. Melissa pulled the phone away slightly, blinking at it as if betrayed. That's fine, she said quickly, straightening. He's probably busy. Busy doing what? The thought slipped in before she could stop it. Daniel wasn't usually unavailable. He didn't fill his time the way she did. He was always there, available, reliable, consistent. She swallowed, pressing her lips together, then tried again. This time it went straight to voicemail. A faint, uncomfortable weight settled in her chest. Okay, she said under her breath. Still fine. She considered leaving a message, something light, casual, normal. But nothing felt normal. What did you say when you realized you had forgotten something you shouldn't have needed reminding about? Happy belated anniversary, sorry. She stopped herself. That wasn't it. That wasn't enough. Melissa lowered her phone, staring at it as if waiting for a better option to appear. None did. Across the ocean, Daniel sat at a small table on the ship's upper deck, a cup of coffee cooling untouched in front of him. He had discovered mornings were different here. Quieter. Fewer people. Less expectation. The couple still existed, of course. They always would. But they moved slower, conversation softer, as if the day hadn't fully decided what it wanted from them yet. Daniel appreciated that. His phone buzzed once, then again, then a third time. He glanced at it without urgency, noting the missed calls. Melissa. His thumb hovered briefly over the screen before he opened the messages. Nothing yet, just calls. He leaned back slightly in his chair, letting the silence around him settle before making a decision. Okay, he said softly to himself, not resistant, not eager, just measured. He didn't call back immediately, not because he was ignoring her, and not because he was trying to prove a point. He simply didn't feel the same immediate pull he might have before. That realization didn't upset him. It interested him. Melissa, meanwhile, had abandoned the lobby entirely. She paced her hotel room now, energy sharp and uneven, her earlier focus completely gone. How did I not see that? She muttered, running a hand through her hair. Her phone buzzed. She froze. Daniel. Her heart lifted just enough to surprise her. She grabbed the phone quickly. Hey, saw your calls. Everything okay? Melissa stared at the message, her chest tightening further at how normal it sounded. No mention of the date. No edge. No accusation. Just, Daniel. Of course, she whispered. He wasn't going to bring it up. Why would he? He had asked. She had answered. Facts. Her thumbs moved quickly now. I'm so sorry. She stopped. Deleted it. Too abrupt. Too vague. She tried again. I just realized what day it is. Better. Worse. More honest. She sent it before she could refine it further, then stood completely still, as if movement might disrupt the response. On the ship, Daniel read the message once. Then again. His expression didn't change. Not much. Just a slight shift in his eyes. Something registering, settling. Right on time, he murmured. Not sarcastic. Not unkind. Just accurate. He typed back, unhurried. Yeah. Melissa's phone lit up almost instantly. She grabbed it. That was it. Just one word. The simplicity of it hit harder than anything else could have. No anger. No reassurance. No attempt to fill the space. Just acknowledgement. Melissa sank onto the edge of the bed, her mind racing to catch up with something she hadn't noticed moving. I didn't mean to forget, she typed quickly. She hesitated, then added, I just got caught up in everything. She stared at the message, then sent it. Across the water, Daniel read it, resting his elbow on the table as he leaned slightly forward. He wasn't surprised. It was exactly the kind of explanation he would have expected. Not wrong, just incomplete. He exhaled softly, then typed back. I know, and he did know. That had never been the question. Melissa read the reply, her shoulders dropping slightly. Not in relief, but in something more complicated. Understanding, maybe, or the beginning of it. Because suddenly it wasn't about whether he knew. It was about the fact that she hadn't. And for the first time in a long while, Melissa Moore didn't have a list item, a plan, or a clear next step. She just had a realization. And the quiet, growing awareness that she might be further behind than she thought. Chapter 6. Parallel Lives, Intersecting Thoughts. By the 4th morning, the rhythm had settled in. Not the shared rhythm Daniel had once assumed vacations required, the quiet compromise of two people syncing their preferences, but something else entirely. A solo rhythm. Adjustable. Efficient. He woke without an alarm, which in itself felt foreign. His body, used to schedules and subtle obligations, still stirred at the usual hour, but there was no urgency attached to it. No clock watched him. No one expected him. Daniel lay still for a moment, staring up at the ceiling of his cabin, listening to the faint hum of the ship as it moved steadily forward. Still going, he murmured. That part amused him more than it should have. Whether he paid attention or not, the ship didn't stop. It didn't wait for him to decide what the day meant. It just kept moving. He swung his legs over the side of the bed and stood, stretching slowly. All right, he said. Let's see what today looks like. There was no list, no plan, just options. He found himself on the deck again, coffee in hand, watching the sunrise paint the horizon in soft layers of color. A few familiar faces had begun to register over the past couple days, other passengers falling into patterns of their own. A man who power-walked every morning with determined focus. A couple who never spoke during breakfast but seemed perfectly content in their silence. And Daniel, the guy who always sits alone, he said quietly, not unkindly. Strong branding. It didn't bother him. Not the way he might have expected. Instead, it gave him space to think and, more dangerously, space to notice. Melissa noticed things differently this morning, too. Not because the environment had changed. Because she had. The conference room was exactly as it had been the day before. The lighting still harsh. The air still slightly too cool. The conversation still layered with strategy and precision. But Melissa's focus didn't lock in the same way. Melissa. She blinked, pulling herself back into the moment. Yes, sorry, she said quickly, straightening in her chair. If we adjust the timeline by even 1 week, we increase risk exposure on the back-end deliverables. Her tone was steady, her point clear. The room nodded along, accepting her input without question. Externally, nothing had slipped. Internally, things had. She glanced, almost instinctively, at her phone. No new messages. Not that she expected any. Daniel wasn't the kind of person who filled silence just to fill it. He responded when there was something to respond to, and she had given him a very little. Her mind drifted, unhelpfully, to the previous evening. The conversation, if it could be called that, had ended with 2 words. I know. That was all he'd said. No follow-up. No elaboration. And somehow, that had said more than any argument could have. Melissa pressed her lips together, forcing her attention back to the presentation as numbers and projections continued to move across the screen. Focus, she told herself. This matters. Did matter. But it wasn't the only thing that did anymore, and that realization kept pulling at her, distracting in a way results never had before. All right, let's wrap here, Trevor said, closing his laptop. Good progress today. Yeah, Melissa replied automatically. Good progress. She packed her things with practiced efficiency, slipping back into motion as the meeting dissolved around her. Motion had always been her advantage. Standing still, she was starting to realize, was where the gaps showed. Daniel found himself in one of the ship's smaller lounges that afternoon, flipping absently through a brochure he hadn't bothered to read before. It listed activities, excursions, experiences, all carefully curated to create memories. He paused on one section, couples wine pairing, enhanced connection through shared experience. Daniel let out a quiet breath that might have been a laugh. Enhanced connection, he repeated. The phrase lingered longer than he expected. Not because it was wrong, because it assumed something already existed, which in his case it did, or had, or still did, just differently. He set the brochure aside and leaned back in his chair. All right, he said softly. Let's be honest for a second. No one answered. He hadn't expected them to. I didn't come here to prove anything, he continued. I didn't come here to be alone. That much was true. He had come because the trip had already been planned, because the money had already been spent, because the alternative, letting it go unused, felt like accepting a loss he wasn't responsible for. But somewhere between boarding the flight and watching the horizon stretch endlessly ahead of him, the reasoning had shifted. He wasn't just using the trip anymore. He was experiencing it, independently, completely, and that raised a question he hadn't needed to ask before. What happens when I go back? He said quietly. Back to the apartment. Back to Melissa. Back to the life that had always included both of them, even when it didn't always feel like it. The thought didn't bring anxiety. It brought clarity. Not answers. Just the space where answers would have to be figured out. Melissa stood at the window of her hotel room that night, looking out at a city she hadn't actually seen since arriving. Lights stretched in every direction, movement constant but distant. She held her phone loosely in her hand, turning it over once, then again. Call him. The thought came naturally. So why wasn't she doing it? Because she didn't know what to say. Hi. I forgot our anniversary, but now I remember and I'd like to retroactively care? She winced slightly. That's not, she muttered. Not wrong. Just insufficient. Melissa leaned her forehead lightly against the cool glass. I didn't mean for it to look like that, she said softly. But hadn't it? Daniel hadn't accused her of anything. He hadn't raised his voice or expressed frustration. He had simply accepted the information she gave him, made a decision, followed through, the same way she did with everything in her own life. Except now she was on the receiving end of that logic, and it felt different. Her phone lit up suddenly. Melissa straightened immediately, heart jumping with a reflex she didn't fully understand. Daniel. She opened the message quickly. Heading back tomorrow. That was it. Short. Informational. Not distant exactly, but not reaching either. Melissa stared at the words, processing them. He hadn't told her where he was. He hadn't explained anything. Just a timeline. Facts. You always did like facts, she murmured. Her thumbs hovered over the screen, then moved. Can we talk when you get back? She sent it before she could second-guess the phrasing. It wasn't polished. It wasn't strategic. It was direct. Over the ocean, Daniel read the message while standing once again at the railing. The wind was stronger tonight, the ship cutting through darker water as it made its return. Can we talk when you get back? He exhaled slowly. Yes, he said aloud, though she couldn't hear him, because that, at least, was simple. They could talk. The harder part would be what came after. He typed his response carefully, but without overthinking it. Yeah, we can. Melissa read the reply, her shoulders relaxing just slightly. Not fixed, not resolved, but moving forward. For the first time in days, their direction didn't feel completely separate. Not aligned yet, but no longer drifting without awareness. And sometimes, she realized, noticing the distance was the only way to start closing it. Chapter 7. The return home. The apartment didn't look different. That was the first thing Melissa noticed when she unlocked the door and stepped inside, her suitcase rolling softly behind her. No dramatic shift. No visible sign that anything had changed. The couch was the same. The kitchen counter still held the small stack of mail she hadn't bothered to look through before she left. Even the calendar on the wall, still barely used, hung exactly where it always had. Everything was familiar. And yet, standing there in the doorway, Melissa felt like she had walked into a place she hadn't fully lived in before. Okay, she said quietly, pushing the door closed behind her. Her voice sounded strange in the space, like it didn't entirely belong yet. She set her suitcase near the wall and moved further inside, taking in details she had passed 100 times without thought. The arrangement of things, the quiet, the absence of motion, no television humming in the background, no faint sound of typing from Daniel's room. No Daniel. Melissa checked her phone automatically. No new messages. His flight had landed earlier. She knew that. She had checked twice, once obsessively, once pretending she hadn't already. He said he'd be back, she murmured. And he would be. Daniel didn't say things casually. If he said he would be back, he would be back. The question wasn't if. It was when. And more importantly, what happened when he was. Melissa exhaled slowly and moved toward the kitchen, opening the fridge without needing anything from it. The habit grounded her, gave her something to do with her hands. I can't just stand here, she muttered. So she didn't. She unpacked. Not completely, just enough to keep moving. Clothes folded and set aside, toiletries returned to their places. Small tasks, mechanical and familiar. But even as she moved through them, her mind stayed fixed on the same point. Talk. She had asked for it. Now she had to have it. What do I even say? She asked aloud, closing a drawer with more care than necessary. Sorry felt obvious, but also inadequate. Explanation felt necessary, but also thin. Because the truth wasn't complicated. She hadn't meant to forget, but she had. And Daniel, quiet, steady Daniel, had made a decision without her. That was the part her mind kept circling back to. Not angrily, not defensively, just trying to understand. The lock clicked. Melissa froze. The sound was soft, ordinary, but it pulled her thoughts to a complete stop. The door opened. Daniel stepped inside, his own bag in hand, moving with the same easy familiarity he always had. For a split second, they just looked at each other. No dramatic pause, no overwhelming rush. Just two people, back in the same space, noticing something that hadn't been there before. Hey, Daniel said. Hey, Melissa replied. Her voice came out quieter than she expected. Daniel set his bag down near the door, his movements unhurried, controlled. He didn't avoid looking at her, but he didn't linger on it either. You made it back okay? He asked. Yeah, she said quickly. Flight was fine. Long, but fine. Good, he said, nodding once. A small silence settled between them. Not tense, not yet, but noticeable. Melissa shifted her weight slightly, resisting the urge to fill it with something meaningless. How was your trip? She asked finally. Daniel glanced at her, then toward the window for a moment, as if considering the question more carefully than it warranted. Different, he said again. The same word. It landed the same way. Melissa let out a small, almost nervous breath. You said that. I know, he replied, a faint hint of a smile at the corner of his mouth. It still applies. She nodded, folding her arms loosely. Not defensive, just grounding. Can we talk? She asked. Direct, simple. Daniel looked at her fully then, his expression calm, open. Yeah, he said. We can. They moved to the living room without discussing it, settling into familiar places that didn't feel quite as automatic as they usually did. Melissa perched on the edge of the couch. Daniel sat across from her, one arm resting along the back, relaxed but attentive. For a moment, Neither spoke. Then Melissa exhaled slowly. I forgot, she said. No build-up. No softening. Just the truth. I forgot our anniversary. Daniel nodded. I know. The words didn't sting exactly, but they didn't comfort either. Melissa looked down briefly, then back up at him. I didn't mean to, she continued. I wasn't ignoring it. She paused, searching for something more precise than what she'd already said. I filled everything else in first, and it didn't even occur to me that I had left something out. Daniel listened, his attention steady, not interrupting. And I get how that sounds, she added, a small, humorless huff escaping her. Actually, no, I don't think I did before. I think I'm just starting to. Another quiet moment passed, not empty, but weighted with something more honest than either of them had brought into conversations like this before. I'm sorry, she said finally. Daniel tilted his head slightly, considering her. I believe you, he said. Melissa blinked, caught off guard by how quickly he accepted it. But, she prompted gently. He smiled faintly. There's always a but, right? Feels like it, she admitted. Daniel leaned forward slightly, resting his forearms on his knees. I asked about your schedule, he said. You told me you were busy. That's true, she said quickly. It is, he agreed. So I took that information and made a decision. Melissa's brow furrowed. To go on the trip? To not remind you, he clarified. To not adjust your decision for you. She hesitated. You could have said something. I could have, he said easily. But then what? Melissa opened her mouth, then stopped. Then I go anyway, she said slower now, thinking it through. Just aware of it. Or, Daniel added, you cancel. Out of guilt. The word hung between them. Melissa exhaled. I wouldn't, she stopped again. Would she? I don't know, she admitted. Daniel nodded once, not pressing the point. I wasn't trying to test you, he said. Or punish you. I didn't think you were, she said quietly. I just used the information I had, he continued, and acted on it. Facts. Melissa let out a soft breath. That sounds familiar. It should, he said, a hint of warmth in his voice now. It's how you operate. That landed differently than it might have a week ago. Melissa shifted slightly, absorbing that. So what does that mean for us? She asked. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't desperate. It was real. Daniel leaned back slightly, considering the question before answering. It means, he said carefully, that we've been living like our lives automatically overlap. Melissa frowned. They do overlap. They should, he said. But they don't always. Her gaze dropped briefly, then returned. And that's on me, she said. It's not just on you, Daniel replied. I let it happen too. How? She asked almost immediately. I didn't say anything, he said simply. Melissa blinked. I assumed you'd notice, he continued. And when you didn't, I adjusted instead of addressing it. Adjusted, she repeated softly. Yeah. Another pause. Then, unexpectedly, Melissa let out a small laugh. Not sharp, not defensive, just surprised. We're really calm about this, she said. Daniel smiled slightly. Do you want to not be? No, she said quickly. No, I don't. Good, he replied. Me neither. She leaned back slightly, tension easing just a fraction. So, she said, we've been living like roommates with good intentions. Daniel raised an eyebrow. That's one way to put it. It's not the best version, she admitted. No, he agreed. Melissa nodded slowly. Okay, she said. Then we fix it. Daniel's expression shifted, not skeptical, not dismissive, just attentive. How? He asked. Melissa didn't answer immediately. For once, she didn't reach for a ready solution or a structured plan. Instead, she sat with the question. I don't know yet, she said honestly. But I think I need to stop assuming that whatever's left over is enough. Daniel studied her for a moment, then nodded. That's a start. She met his gaze, something steadier settling into place. Yeah, she said. It is. The room fell quiet again. But this time, it wasn't uncertain. It was open, not fixed, not finished, but no longer avoided. And for the first time in a while, they weren't just existing in the same space. They were actually there, together. Chapter 8. Right on time, change, Melissa was discovering, did not arrive with a checklist. It didn't line itself up neatly into actionable steps, complete with deadlines and measurable outcomes. It resisted structure, which was deeply inconvenient for someone like her. And yet, standing in her own kitchen 2 mornings after their conversation, she found herself not reaching for a list. Instead, she stood still, hands resting lightly on the counter, staring at the empty space where she would normally set her phone. No list, she said quietly, testing the idea out loud. It didn't feel natural, but neither, she was starting to realize, had the way things had been. Behind her, the bedroom door opened, followed by the familiar rhythm of footsteps she had always registered, but not always noticed. Morning. Daniel said, voice easy. Morning, she replied, turning toward him. This part at least hadn't changed. And yet it had. Not in any visible way. Not in tone or posture or routine. Just in awareness. Daniel reached for the coffee maker, moving through his usual motions with quiet efficiency. He didn't comment on her standing there, didn't ask why she wasn't already halfway out the door or buried in her phone. He just existed beside her. Melissa watched him for a moment. I moved dinner, she said suddenly. Daniel glanced at her, one eyebrow lifting slightly. Moved dinner. Tonight, she clarified. With Jess. He nodded. Okay. I didn't reschedule it, she added. I just moved it. A tiny distinction. But not to her. Daniel seemed to understand that, a faint smile forming. Got it. Melissa exhaled. A small release of something she hadn't realized she'd been holding. I told her I'm busy, she continued, almost as if explaining it to herself. You are busy, he said. I know, she said. But not like that. He leaned back slightly against the counter, coffee mug now in hand. How are you busy? He asked. Melissa paused. Not because she didn't know, because she was choosing how to articulate it. Present, she said finally. Or trying to be. Daniel studied her for a second, then nodded once. That's a different kind of busy, he admitted. Yeah, she said, a hint of a smile appearing. It is. There was no dramatic shift in the room. No swelling music or sudden clarity. Just two people adjusting something small that might eventually matter a lot. Later that day, Melissa found herself sitting at her desk, staring at her calendar again. This time, she wasn't scanning for obligations. She was evaluating them. Okay, she muttered, tapping a block of time with her pen instead of immediately rearranging it digitally. Her promotion track still mattered. That hadn't changed. But something else had been given equal weight now. Not automatically, not perfectly, but deliberately. She hovered for a moment, then did something she hadn't done in a long time. She added something that wasn't work-related. Not tentative. Not flexible. Set. Dinner with Daniel. No qualifiers. No backup plan. Melissa leaned back slightly, looking at it. Not revolutionary, she said. But it's a start. Her phone buzzed. Clarkson. She smiled faintly and picked it up. Hey, she answered. Yeah, I've got the revised proposal ready. Her tone shifted seamlessly, professional, confident, focused. Nothing lost. Just balanced differently. That evening, Daniel stood in the same living room, the same space where they had finally said the things that needed saying. But tonight was lighter. Not because everything had been resolved, because something had been acknowledged. Melissa appeared from the hallway, pausing just slightly when she saw him. Hi, she said. Hi, he replied. The simplicity of it made her laugh softly. We say hi a lot, she said. It works, Daniel answered. It does, she agreed. She moved toward him, slower than her usual pace. Not hesitant, just intentional. I have a question, she said. Okay, he replied. She folded her arms loosely, then unfolded them again, abandoning the gesture halfway through. On your trip, she began. Did you do anything fun? Daniel's expression shifted. Not defensive, not guarded, just thoughtful. Yeah, he said. I did. Like what? He smiled faintly. I tried a wine pairing. Melissa blinked. You hate wine pairings. I know, he said. Seemed like a good time to try something I wouldn't normally do. She laughed, a real one this time. How was it? Educational, he said. And slightly confusing. That sounds about right. They shared a small moment of amusement, the kind that felt easy, unforced. Melissa tilted her head slightly. Did you think about me at all? The question wasn't accusatory. It wasn't loaded. Just curious. Daniel met her gaze. Yeah, he said simply. I did. She nodded, absorbing that. Me too, she admitted. Another small silence followed, but this one felt different from the ones before. Not empty, just comfortable. So, Daniel said, shifting slightly, what do we do with that? Melissa considered the question, a smile tugging at the corner of her mouth. We don't waste it, she said. Fair, he replied. She stepped a little closer, not dramatically, just enough to close some of the space that had been lingering there. You booked a cruise, she said, almost casually. Daniel raised an eyebrow. I did. Balcony? She asked. He exhaled a quiet laugh. You found the confirmation, didn't you? Eventually, she admitted. You hide things very neatly. I wasn't trying to hide it, he said. I know, she replied. You were just not saying it. That sounds familiar, he noted. She winced slightly, then smiled. Yeah, it does. Another beat passed. Then, we should go, Melissa said. Daniel blinked. The cruise. Maybe not that exact one, she corrected. But something. He studied her for a moment. To make up for it? He asked. Melissa shook her head. No, she said. Not to make up for anything. Then why? She met his gaze steady this time. To actually be there. The answer lingered between them. Simple. Clear. Enough. Daniel nodded slowly. Okay, he said. We can do that. Melissa smiled. Relief and something lighter mixing together in her expression. Good, she said. He tilted his head. You're going to put it on a list, aren't you? She pretended to consider it. Maybe, she admitted. He laughed softly. Of course. But, she added quickly, stepping closer still. This time I'll look at the list. Daniel's smile settled into something warmer, quieter. That would help, he said. For a moment they just stood there, the space between them no longer something to navigate, but something they had chosen to close. Not perfectly, not permanently, but intentionally. And sometimes, Melissa realized that made all the difference. Later, as they sat side by side, not across from each other, not passing through, but actually together, Melissa glanced at the calendar on the wall. Still mostly empty, still slightly neglected, but no longer irrelevant. She leaned her head lightly against Daniel's shoulder. 5 years, she murmured. Daniel rested his hand gently over hers. 5 years, he echoed. Next one, she added. I won't forget. He smiled faintly. I believe you. She turned slightly, looking up at him. And if I do? She asked. Daniel considered that for a second, a familiar glint of quiet humor appearing in his eyes. Then I guess, he said. I'll plan something non-refundable again. Melissa huffed a laugh. Fair. They sat in the soft quiet of the evening, the kind that didn't expose distance anymore, just space they had chosen to share. The future wasn't mapped out. It wasn't scheduled or perfectly balanced. But for the first time in a long while, it wasn't something they were just moving through. It was something they were stepping into, together, right on time.